Hello, YouTube. Coming back. I've been kind of lazy the past couple days. Been busy at work and been playing a lot of Star Wars. But I'm actually bringing a pretty special episode to you today. Bringing you Mr. Alice. He's number one or number two on the arena board right now, and he's been kind enough to share his deck list with us. And so, how you doing today, Mr. Alice?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Been looking forward to this deck talk, so you know.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start out with your hero choice. You've got Legia Bell at level 4.
hmm
Go ahead and briefly describe why you chose Legia for the type of deck that you're playing.
Well, pretty much for right now, one of the big powerhouse decks these days seems to be items. I've noticed that a lot of the people on the top of the arena are playing this, and realistically, there's no legitimately powerful solution to it right now. I find that the recent nerf that's been put on the Gemstone Homunculus is actually, severely handicapped the card in terms of playing it for the item destruction. But what this deck does have is Spearhead of Crimson King, which has the Hero Ward and is just a fantastic creature in itself. Now, I don't know. Some people know this, some people don't. Legia Bell's third ability that has a target Aspire, I don't know how to pronounce it, creature, ally controls, and target creature and opponent controls each deal damage to each other, is all worded in one sentence. So it isn't that it has a prerequisite requirement, which means they will simultaneously deal the damage to one another. But given the fact that, Spearhead of Crimson King has Hero Ward, it will actually not take any of the damage. So this is just a way of you to actually deal 3 or potentially 4 damage, or maybe even more if you use the appropriate shards or buffs onto the Spearhead in order to actually wipe out a creature. A pretty hefty creature. It'll kill off things like Crusading Knights, Chimera. It blows off without actually triggering the blast on it. Just hands down, it does it at instant speed, so you can be swinging with another creature. They'll block with something hefty, and you guarantee it to go through. So it is just a fantastic ability altogether. Another thing is I've just kind of been leaning towards building her up because I don't know if many people know the level 6 Legia Bell is actually it's pretty insane. The first ability that destroys a target non-human creature with level 3 or less. It only costs 3 mana, and it can trigger off on turn 9 as opposed to turn 11, which is, once again, just amazing on its own. And the third ability actually adds an additional 1 damage to the creature that you're targeting. So it means that, Spearhead will be able to hit those 4 toughness creatures, or 4 HP creatures, I guess, in this game, without actually needing any buffs or any, um, ascended AP on it to say. So that's kind of really what it goes through right here, and it's just the fact that you can do it at instant speed. It's just a solution to so many creatures.
All right, sounds good. I was about ready to ask you if you're going to level her up to level 6 because I was looking at her abilities, but you pretty much well covered that.
Uh-huh.
Um, all right, so moving on to your level 1. I see that you're on 3 long spear soldiers. How come you're on that instead of, like, say, Messenger of Richard or the 1/1 Rusher guy?
Well, the one Rusher guy is basically, it's only suited if you're going to be going for, a rush style deck, and you want to be hitting the opponent's hero with it. If you're going to be using that, the idea behind this deck is, well, I've run a similar deck like that before. The problem is it just lacks consistency because you're not exactly sure whether you're going to draw this card on turn 1. If you get it later turns, it's not so hot. You basically have no control where you want to play it. Whereas Long Spear Soldier, if you just have it on turn 1, let's say, and you got nothing better to play, you can put in defense and just stops so many, like, those early game threats. Like, a lot of people play birds. Birds won't go through that. You'll be able to trade for it. The other thing is you run the shard in this one, Fire Lair. Primarily to fuel the last blow that you need to use, which is, just a fantastic card altogether. But the problem is, if you're just going to be using Fire Lair to fuel last blow, it kind of lacks a little bit of the, kick. So Longspear Soldier will just remove so many of those 2 toughness creatures, those 3/2s, those, 2/3s that you've dealt 1 damage to per se by using, a rogue or something, and you can just basically swing it and it becomes, 1 for nothing kind of card. Like, you still get to keep your Long Spear Soldier, and then it's something that they have to deal with later. And I mean, it's like it's a complete surprise for 1 mana to drop something like that and fire off it with giving it Rusher with Fire Lair.
Very good point. I never even thought about that with Fire Layer. Yeah, the Defiance 2 is actually, I mean, Defiance, in my opinion, is a pretty overlooked mechanic. I mean, I think a lot of people are starting to look at it a little bit more, especially with this card and then the next card we're going to talk about, which is Bedchamber Guard. You run 3 of these as well. Go ahead and tell me why you chose to run this card.
Well, Bedchamber Guard is just in itself a fantastic, like I said, card again. The problem is in this game is, you can build a deck, but there's not enough cards to complement your, deck theory or whatever you're trying to attain. Bedchamber Guard in itself is just a 1/1 for 2 mana that you drop down. It has Defiance 1. It'll drop those creatures that have the 2 toughness and are level 3, which is, a perfect trade, but you still get a card off it. So at the end of the day, you're just paying 2 mana for a free card. I mean, a lot of people don't realize how amazing that is because card advantage is such a huge component in any card game. But in this, like I said, you just play it, and at best, what the opponent can do is swing at it with something that has higher toughness, in which case, or sorry, HP in this game, in which case it might trade, which means you've gotten a card off of this, you've traded one of their creatures, so you've got the +1 card advantage. Or what they could do is, if they're playing Arcane or something, they'll drop their Firebolt on it, which at the end of the day, once again, they're expending a card to kill off something that you've drawn a card off of. So altogether, it's just a fantastic card, offensively, defensively, whatever it is.
Yeah, card advantage is pretty important in this game, especially since I think, at least for me, I've seen that at least in Arena. I know I'm at the lower levels, but I've seen that Rush has kind of gone away and it's slipped to more mid-range to late-game control decks. Mm-hmm. So I can definitely see what you're saying as far as him being a good answer for late-game drops, and in himself is a pretty early drop. So, all right, moving on to your next level 2, you picked Hero Candidate.
Yep, I think you actually kind of discussed this card in one of your item control deck talks. I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said. It's just a fantastic card. It's an early game 1/2 drop that becomes a 3/3, becomes a 4/3, makes your other creatures big. Once again, all they can do from your opponent's side is deal with it by expending one of their cards, which at the end of the day, it's a 1-for-1. You don't really care. But if they don't deal with it early game, especially with something like dropping this fire followed by Garden of Emperor, then the next turn they're basically dealing with a 3/3, and it's something that they have to deal with. Now, the only weakness I found to this card is somebody else playing, for example, Longspear Soldier with the Fire Lair. It immediately removes it, or they can just fire off a shield charge at it, which at the end of the day, it's a 1-for-1, so it's not like I'm complaining about it. Sure, I'd like to see it hit the 3/3, but if they fire off a shield charge, it's once again my turn to play something.
Yep, I totally agree with that. I mean, like when I'm playing items, I do everything in my power to keep stuff off their board until Hero Candidate hits 3, and then she just wrecks house, especially if you can get multiple down.
Right.
So, all right. I see you. You have chosen to run a lot of level 2s. So your next one you run is Rogue. I mean, this is a pretty self-explanatory card. I mean, it's just in about every Aspire deck you play. But how does it serve in your deck?
Once again, it's just an answer to a bunch of the little solutions. One of the problems that you have, if you're dealing with, I don't know how to pronounce it, Siron, the green guys, they've got that Shard of Sienna, that little annoying shard that, gives you the creature for nothing. This is just explicitly a solution to something like that. I mean, I think everybody knows that if you leave those 0/1 little plants out, they're going to slowly overrun you. And this is just one of those things that you have a direct solution to. And early game, there's just so many things that are played that have 1 HP. And this, once again, this card just basically puts you at the advantage. What a lot of people, I think, have recognized, at least in this game, is that, your hero HP is expendable to some extent. Cards are not. You don't want to be wasting cards. You don't want to use 2 cards to get rid of one of their cards. That's a win situation for them. Sacrificing a little bit of HP here and there in order to get rid of one of their cards is perfectly acceptable, especially early game, where you're trying to, attain the card advantage and put them on the defensive. So, I think it's pretty self-explanatory where the Rogue comes from.
Yeah, it's a pretty good 2-for-1, and I mean, it's a basic 2, so I mean, it's like anybody can get a hold of it.
Right.
So, alright, and you're slipping to your 3 slot, at least for the Aspire creatures, you run Borderland Besetter. You only run 2s. How well does this serve you?
Well, I've noticed it's actually done very well every time. The idea is, at its best, it's a 2-for-1. You get rid of one of their level 1 creatures. Sierron, especially these days, is running a lot of hefty rush. I've noticed there's that, I forget the name there, I can look it up right now. There's that one Sierron level 1 creature that basically becomes a 3/1 at the expense of deactivating one of the creatures. It deals 1 damage to your hero, but it's something that you just, you don't want to deal with these things. 2-headed Dryad. This thing is just a solution to that. The problem with running any more of them is that at some points there will be dead cards in your hand. They don't always serve this purpose. The other benefit though is at worst, sorry, rather, it is a 3/2. It deals with other cards such as, for example, some Psyche, however you pronounce it, control runs the Fog Elemental, which will bounce a 3/2 into defense from attack, which is extremely annoying. With the Borderland Beast Setter, you can just pay the 4 mana sometime in the future to pop it up to the front, and it's basically like that did nothing. It deals well with cards like Starsan's Top Student, which once again has the pushing. It'll push it back, but once again in the future you can just pop it forward and have a nice 3/2 creature with a possibility to getting rid of something like a Master of Mind or whatever the case may be later. So at the end of the day, it ends up being a 2-for-1.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of powerful one drops. Like you were talking about Two-Headed Dryad. I've seen that running around a lot lately, and Starsan's Top Student is just annoying altogether. So I can definitely see why you run 2 of them in there. All right, switching to another level 3 that you run. You run 3 of Hidden Ashy Wing. It's one of the newer cards actually that's coming out. How well has that performed for you?
It is fantastic. I mean, sometimes I wonder. I'm not sure exactly where these cards come from or where they're putting them. There's just too many. Like my theory with cards is that if you're going to introduce a new card, it shouldn't be. It's basically a mirror copy of another existing card, except better, because that just it kind of defeats the purpose of the original card as to why it ever existed or who's ever going to use it. And I'm not a big fan of that. But this is basically what that card has done. If you look at Swordsman of Lunacy, rather, it does pretty much the same thing, except is infinitely worse. You put it in defense, and you've got a 1/1, which can be dealt by anything. A rogue can hit into it later. You trade for nothing, and you get the 2 AP. And when you put it in to attack, you've got a 4/1, sure, but at the end, a rogue hits it and gets rid of it. This thing you put into attack, it will become a 4/2 when you're swinging. Although, to be perfectly honest, I'm very rarely have the luxury of using it in attack, just because it doesn't offer any specific card advantage. Putting in defense, once again, will provide card advantage. You will be stuck with a nice 2/2 defender, while you've gotten rid of something hefty of theirs, and deals with pains in the ass, pains in the bum, whatever we want to say here, like Starsan's Top Student, which as a 0/2 defender, you'll again just get rid of it with this, and nobody sees it coming because you can swing with something else. They might defend with one of their other creatures, and then you drop this and you're swinging for 2, and it's just something I think is going to change the metagame a lot. It is a fantastic card for, like I said, the given reasons.
Yep, I agree. I actually I'm working on getting my 3rd copy for my psych deck. It's my psych deck's pretty much all removal, so I drop her and then protect her and just swing with her a bunch. But I can definitely see what you're saying as far as being a better Swordman of Lunacy. But would you run Swordman of Lunacy instead? Like, is it for people that are free to play? Like, I've put some money into the game, but like people that are free to play, would you recommend them to run Swordman of Lunacy maybe over this or no?
I'd probably say not. I would say they should play something else. Just like I said, though, Swordsman of Lunacy, the problem is when you put in defense, it's very easy to counterattack with a rogue, with so many of these cards that are played these days. Siron plays that Naga Aid or whatever it's called, the 2/1 that gives a +1/+1. The problem is these cards will trade with the card, which means it puts you back at where you started. But if you drop a 2/2, it makes a significant difference it being a 2/2. The fact is that now they can't deal with it with creatures like rogues and that Naga Aid that I've told you about, and etc. It's just they have to expend a lot more of their resources in order to get rid of it.
Yep, makes perfect sense. All right, moving on to your 4-drop. I see you run 2 Hero of Hero of Crimson Armor. How come you only run 2? And how well has that guy actually served you as far as like having less creatures on the board?
I think it's one of those cards I think it's pretty much become staple. A lot of people don't see it coming, and it's impossible to see it coming. Honestly, you can sort of predict it, but if you're put in a situation where you're playing around this card and you don't want to have more creatures than the other guy, then once again it's hindering your play style. So it is just a great card, really. If they do put enough creatures down, you can basically get rid of 2 of them. I'll mention this card again later just because of some of the other purposes it serves, but I kind of have to have addressed some of the other cards that I run in the deck in order to explain the synergy between them. But once again, it's just one of those cards that usually turns for a 2-for-1, which is acceptable by any standards. I wouldn't play more than 2, though, because if you do have more creatures, it is a completely dead card. A 1/3 is nothing spectacular. It's extremely easy to deal with. So you really do need to hit that rusher in order to actually, utilize the card for what it's supposed to be used for.
Totally understandable. Whenever I see my opponents throw this in defense, I just kind of laugh to myself and like, yeah, I've pretty much won the game.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to your 5 slot. You said you run a Spearhead of the Crimson King, right?
Yes.
How many of those do you run, and why? I mean, you've explained why it's so good because of with the hero skill, but why else do you run it?
Well, the other thing is, it's the hero skill. Hero Ward also is just, once again, one of those amazing things in this game. It just deals with items. It deals with hero abilities. It just deals with a lot of the problems that people have. So, but the only solution to this card is, Blow of Judgment or something along those lines, or any of those other cards that I don't see, Dark Shadow being played that much. I see, whatchamacallit, The Last Blow being played. But once again, these are just 2 cards that can kind of deal with Hero Ward. A lot of the other people I've noticed do rely on using their hero's abilities in order to get rid of cards like this. It totally prevents Aspire using, their hero buffing attack power abilities in order to deal with it. So, they can't get rid of it with, let's say, 4 rogues, which, would be unlikely anyways, but, it could happen. So, like I said, it's just a fantastic card altogether. It also synergizes very well with Ricard, the hyper that I have in here. Just because that +1 AP actually turns to +2 AP when he hits the hero. Which is, hitting for 8 in one swing from one creature is a pretty big deal. Especially considering that if they do decide to block the Ricard, you can just fire off the Lagia's ability and get rid of their creature with the, basically forcing the hero to fight the creature that may be trying to defend Ricard.
Alright, sounds good. And looks like you do have one more 5-drop, at least from the list you sent me, and that's Imperial Force Cavalry.
Right.
It says you run 3. How well does that serve you?
It's done a good job. The only reason that I run this as opposed to Spearhead, I may actually swap 1 or 2 of them out. Actually 1, just to get another Spearhead, maybe if once I get Lagia to 6. Simply because there are those other creatures like Crusading Knights and what's the green one called? Behemoth, I think. And just those kind of 4-drops that I see being played a lot, where the Spearhead of Crimson King is not going to deal with it unless you actually buff it with the Shard. So, you kind of need something to end up getting Ricard or any of these other cards to freely swing it on their hero. It also turns Imperial Force Cavalry easily turns for a 2-for-1 with Lagia's ability, because you can swing with something that they have, like a defender that might be, let's say, 1 Behemoth. You swing at it, and before the attack goes through, you use your ability to actually fight the other Behemoth, which means this thing will be a 4-1 while it's hitting that Behemoth, and then you've gotten rid of 2 Behemoths, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely 2-for-1ing with 2 level 6s is pretty good. So,
yeah.
All right, slip into your 6-drops. You're running one of the new ones. It's hyper, and it's let me find it here. It's Great General Richard. Go ahead and briefly describe how this card works and why you think it's so good.
Well, basically, it effectively for 6 mana is a 3/5. I mean, that in itself is amazing. Shield it's better than a 3/5 in my opinion in most cases, simply because it deals with hordes of 1/1s that are dropped on it. 1/1s will not kill this creature. 2 2/2s will not kill this creature. 3 2/2s will not kill this creature. You need 4 creatures with 2 attack to get rid of this thing, which in itself is fantastic. But when you're actually hitting the actual hero, it's hitting for more than 3. It hits for 6, or whatever you end up buffing it with. Using the shards, which one is it? Spy's Hideout, for example, here, which is a shard I run. You can make it a 4/4 on the turn it comes out, and when you're swinging, you're actually hitting for 8. It trades with giving the shard without any of Lagia's abilities or anything. It'll trade with 6/6s, just because when they block, you'll actually more than trade. You're getting 2-for-1 or something for 1, because it's got the shield. The other 4/4 will block it. This thing will get its shield, and you'll be left with a 4/1 at the end of the day, which is effectively still amazing, considering they still need to expend more of their resources in order to deal with it. It does a great job defending. It does a great job of attacking. It's just altogether a fantastic card for 6 mana. I'm interested to see if they will nerf it in the future, or any of these hypers for that matter. I don't exactly agree with the philosophy of making cards better at the expense of rarity, where people may need to invest money or just get extremely lucky, as kind of has been my case with this. I don't know. I just don't think it's a great philosophy for a competitive card game. But I'm hoping to milk it a little more before they do nerf it. So we'll see where that goes.
And there you go. You got to do it while you can.
Yeah.
All right. Slipping down to you do run 3 Bird of Good Luck. I would go over this, but I mean, Bird of Good Luck is pretty much a staple in just about every deck you play, just because it's so good.
Right.
So I think we'll go ahead and skip that one, and we'll move on to your spells. I see you run 2 Last Blow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, running 2 seems like to be a pretty common number because you don't want to, cluster your hand with it or whatever.
Right.
But how often do you ever see both of them played during the game, or usually only one? Or
I've seen most commonly I see one played, but it hasn't been it hasn't been very rare for me to play both of them. There's been cases where, just because of the situation on the board, once again, this is just it being great with Richard over there. I'll have my 4/4 Richard, and he'll end up dropping a 4/4 or anything, a level 6 to block, and I may have already used a Last Blow, and I may have 6 cards in my hand. This guy may have 6 or 7 in his hand as well, and I will effectively discard all other 5 of my cards just to fuel this thing so I can swing in for 8 with Richard. I don't think you can probably do that with any other card, but I have been known to do that in these games, and just because I see he has no mana left, there's nothing that he could do effectively against this, and it just to swing in for the win. So 2 it's not outlandish to run in this particular deck, at least.
all right, fair enough. And like you said, you got Fire layered on it. I mean, in the deck that I run 2. I've sometimes run 3, just depending, because I run Sword of the Resistance as well, because it's got Burial. But since you've only really got Fire layer to fuel it, 2 seems to be a good number.
Mm-hmm.
Slipping down to your burst spot, I see you run 3 Shield Charge. How come you only run 3 and not 4? Because a lot of decks I've seen, they run 4.
It's just whenever I run it, there have been cases where it's been a dead card, like a dead draw to me. I just haven't had anything to target with it. At the end of the day, it also is a problem that a lot of the philosophy in this deck is to trigger 2-for-1s to happen. Shield Charge is one of those spells that you can't get a 2-for-1 out of it. It can fix you up for a 2-for-1 so that you can swing with something else and kill off the creature that's trying to defend whatever you're maybe hitting with. But it's one of those cards that's too situational to actually be warranted as being used as I think more than anything more than 3 is the idea here.
Okay, understandable. I mean, like I said, it's pretty much a stable card too, just because it kills level 2s, and it also goes really well with Garden of the Emperor.
Right.
Because you can kill their level 3s and they don't see it coming. So, all right. The other one you run is I'm actually surprised when you sent me the list to see this, but you run 2 Kaori Draws the Sword.
Mm-hmm.
Explain your philosophy behind this.
Well, there's 2 things out of it. One of the things is you fuel your graveyard with this card, in the sense, at least a bit, in the sense that you will get the spell in your graveyard and you will get an item out of it. So it is another way of fueling Last Blow. That's one of the things out of it. The other thing is, you get a level 4 spell, which is a level 4 item, which is no longer targetable by Gemstone Homunculus. That some people still do play. You get to play it on their turn, so they don't see it coming, and then effectively for 2 mana you can get rid of anything, like Master of Mind, for example, or any of those cards that a lot of people do not see it coming. The other thing with it is there will be times where, let's say, I will have if you've looked at my 3 drops, I will have a Hidden Ashy Wing or something, and if they don't have any creatures down, I don't want to play that card in attack. I don't have anything to give it Rusher. There's plenty of things I can deal with a 2/2. But from the opponent, they could use Blow of Judgment. They can do anything. At the end of the day, it's just nothing's happening. But if I leave 3 mana open, I can effectively, given whatever they play Crowley Draws a Sword, and then next turn using, at that point, if the shard triggers, I'll have 4 mana. I can, expend that 1 extra mana to drop the Hidden Ashy Wing, in which case I will have a 2/2, and I'll have 2 mana to get rid of whatever creature they may have dropped, which once again puts me at the advantage, because next turn if they do play Blow of Judgment, I've got 2 mana to hit their hero with for 3 damage, so it's just one of those tempo game things. It just works out too well, I find.
Fair enough. And like you said, I didn't realize items is still at top tier, but when I play items at the lower levels, you never see item hate, so running 2 of these isn't a bad idea, and at least you get a use out of it before it gets destroyed most of the time. So
right.
All right, slipping down to your shards. The first one you listed was Brand of Flame,
Hmm.
and you run two of them.
Yep.
What's your philosophy behind this card?
It's just I run two of them because there are times when it's good. You see it, you know, um, make play, whether it be at the end where I just need that one damage. It has happened occasionally where the opponent brings himself, whether through using shards or birds of good luck or whatever the case may be, just a 1 HP. And at the end of the day, I need this in order to, deal that one damage, but I need to effectively play some creatures first in order for them to, block those or deal with it or whatever the case may be. And then you kind of trick them into taking the one damage because they don't really see that coming. It's just a mana expendability thing, really. The other thing is if they have 2/2s, or if you played a 1/1, or if you play a lot of people make the mistake of when they see you play a rogue on turn 2, next time they'll play that Wolf of Aharujin or whatever it's called. I'm not sure, that 2/3 that is kind of like a trap for themselves. This is the only, one of the only effective ways to deal with it. If you play Brand of Flame followed by another rogue, per se, you can actually end up killing it and set them back a mana, which is, a huge deal. People don't appreciate how much mana tempo sets people back. It's just one of those ways to deal with something. Another thing is it is another way to discard cards, fueling Last Blow. I know it's only one card, but it does effectively make a difference. And you still get 1 AP on your hero, which means you can deal with those 1/1s or whatever the case may be.
Yep, that's true. And I mean, with something like that, I mean, you can effectively drop, if they happen to, summon evil, and then you get to turn 4, you effectively have, enough cards in your graveyard between this and maybe Fire Layer to actually kill it without having to discard anything.
Right.
All right. The second land you run is 3 Fire Layers. You've already kind of went over it, but is there anything else that you'd like to share about the card?
Nothing really. I think that's all it is. It's just a way to fuel Last Blow, and it serves it's fantastic with Long Spear Soldier. Sometimes you'll have a problem with getting them both in your hand, but when you do, it's just usually, sets the opponent back quite a bit. And I found that whenever I have had both in my hand, the opponent usually has not won, just because it is so hard to recover from. And yeah, that's pretty much all that goes with it.
Fair enough. Slipping to your third chart, you actually run 4 of these, and that's Garden of the Emperor. It's one of the few cards they actually do run 4 of. How come you run 4?
One of the other cards, I noticed it before when we were discussing this, you may have skipped over some of my 4 drops, which kind of leads to explaining why I do run 4 of them. I actually also run Rider of a Carriage and Pair, and also Sword of Colossi. I don't think we mentioned those, but...
No, we didn't. I'm sorry. We skipped over those. We can go ahead and talk about them now.
Well, if you want to, we can.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and come back to the shard. Yeah, they were on the list. I just forgot to write them down. So you're on Sword of Colossi. How many do you run? And I mean, it seems pretty good, but how does the card work for you?
Well, I run two of them. It's proven to run pretty well. I think 2/4s, like the 2 AP for defense, are... I think in any competitive deck, it is mandatory to have at least 1 or 2 of them. There are situations where you need them. A 3/3 will just not cut it. Anything with less than 4 defense will usually not cut it. And it's, I think every single one of the factions in this game has a 2/4 that they can drop for 4 mana. And in any control style deck, it is absolutely necessary to run them, I feel. The thing with Sword of Colossi is also it feeds Hero Candidate to, become either a 2/2 or a 4/3 earlier, or whatever the case may be, depending on the training that it has. It also goes well with, once again, I said a big deal is fueling that, at least right now for me, is fueling the Spearhead of Crimson King. If you put the training on it with the Garden of Emperor, you can make that effectively a 4/4 by dropping Sword of Colossi down. Which makes a big difference. It also goes well with the fact that you get a 2/4, and then if you play Spy's Hideout, you have a 3/4 for 4 mana, which is, if you look at some of the other cards that you get a 3/4 for 4 mana, it's just the drawbacks associated with them are completely insane. Like Insatiable Doll, for example, the fact that you get stuck with 0 mana unless you actually kill something that's worthwhile. It just goes too well with some of the cards going in here, but mostly it's just for fueling the AP on the training.
All right, fair enough. It seems like there's a lot of synergy between training and the cards you run. So, and you mentioned the other one you run is Rider of Carriage and a Pair. How many do you run, and how often does the ability on it actually serve you?
I run two. Ability occasionally serves its purpose. It's just something that the opponent has to deal with or play around in order to not get 2-for-1. It is just a fine ability. There's nothing wrong with it. For 3 mana, you get rid of a creature that costs 3 or less, but you have to have 5 graveyard cards in your graveyard to banish. It's not a problem if you do trigger it. It's once again a 2-for-1 at the worst. It also has the Revenger one, which occasionally has seen has seen play, where I've actually had 10 cards in my graveyard. It's just when I haven't played Last Blow. Most of the time it happens against Arcane control decks, just because they have that magic ward. And at that point, Last Blow becomes kind of, worthless card, which is maybe one of the other reasons I only run 2 of them, as opposed to more than that. It's just you do see Arcane control, and at that point you do not want to be drawing these Last Blows. Basically, they're just there to be put into Mana Zone and hopefully hit a shard draw off your Bird of Good Luck. So yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much what it comes down with Rider of Carriage and Pair. I think it's just one of those 3/3s for 4 mana that just has a great ability going with it.
Right, fair enough. So I think you went over Guardian of the Emperor pretty well when you talked about those two. So you were on two gemstones, or three gemstones of suppress.
Yep.
How often does this actually come into effect versus anything other than Aspire?
Very rarely. It doesn't do anything against any other deck, pretty much. It's just a shard. The drawing 1 turn later is not such a big deal, though, considering that most of the time I will draw what I need with either Bedchamber Guards or, whatever the case may be at the time. Pretty much Bedchamber Guards is the only thing that will draw you cards. If you really want to play something quickly, you can often just put it into Mana Zone, drop a Bird of Good Luck, and, call it a day. Sometimes they'll just serve as one of those toss-away shards so that you can accelerate a turn faster than your opponent. To play Hidden Ashy Wing or whatever the case may be, which is also fine. But against Aspire items is a huge deal because it basically forces them to expend one of their Maids of Schubert, or is it Schubert, whatever it is, in order to actually deal with, let's say, a 1/1. So it's not quite that it forces them to do a 1-for-1 as opposed to a 0-for-1. But it definitely makes it more difficult for them to make use of their Sword of the Resistance, which I think it's just played in just about every Aspire item deck.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Sword of the Resistance and Giant Piercer are the two weapons of choice usually in Aspire weapons, just because they're so cheap to get out and fuel so many other things.
And Gemstone also deals with the Giant Piercer as well, so...
Oh, that's a good point as well. All right, so you talked about this card a little bit, but Spy of Hideout... Spy Hideout. You run 3.
Yep.
You run a lot of later drops, so I can see why you run it. But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But go ahead.
No worries. I think pretty much what I went over with is that's kind of why I use it. Once again, it goes extremely well with Richard. It goes well with Spearhead of Crimson King. Imperial Forces Cavalry is not such a good hit off of it, although I suppose one of these days I may be seeing one of those 5/5 elites drop, or maybe a Dragon of the Omen or something, in which case... it'll allow me to trade my Imperial Forces Cavalry with the Dragon, but it hasn't happened yet. And like I said, one of the things I've been extremely surprised about, it wasn't in my plan when I was building the deck, is how well it actually does go with Sword of Colossi. Getting that, like I said, 3/4 on turn 4 is just, it's pretty amazing, honestly. It also, I can only remember one game that I played actually against Surpass, which I don't know if he's still silver, but he was at some point. Ran Arcane Control, and he would drop that 3/4 Arcane Defender for 5 mana, the MK something, the one that hits everything for 1, either attack or defense for sacrifice. I don't remember the name of the card. But I had this guy down. He was a 3/4 on turn 4. He had dropped his 3/4 Defender on turn 5. I followed it with another Spy's Hideout and basically, effectively killed off a 5 mana creature for a 4 mana creature and nothing else, and I still had a 4/1 standing at the end of the day. It's a big deal. I mean, these are the kind of plays that really make the difference, I find. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it's plays like that make, the top between silver and gold. A lot of people are like, oh, it's all about rarity and stuff. And I'm like, I've seen, people use decks with just commons and uncommons, just stomp people in the ground that, put money into the game. So, I mean, it's just little plays like that that actually do make a difference between, going silver and gold and stuff like that. All right, slipping to your last one, you run 3 Snowfield of Border. This is kind of a shock to me because a lot of decks you see run 4. How come you only run 3?
I used to run 4 in a lot of the decks. I've just found that there have been times where I've played it and I didn't make any use of the 1 extra mana, or I've been playing first and it just did 1 damage to me. Given that I'm already running, 3 rogues, which I'm hoping not to use the +1 AP to hit a hero with, and 3 hidden ashy wings, which are also I'm hoping not to have to hit a hero with. And then there's also the Curry draws a sword, which deals 1 damage to you, and there's the what are we looking? Bedchamber Guards, which deal 1 damage to me again. There's the hero with Crimson Iron Armor, which once again deals 1 damage to me when it comes into play. It's just I can't afford to have this many things that deal 1 damage to my hero. And effectively, if I need the 1 extra mana, I can drop it and not suffer from it because of cards like Bedchamber Guards, which, regardless of me playing first or second, will get me an extra card and accelerate me forward. But that's kind of basically the philosophy behind why I run only 3, and 2 just doesn't seem like a number that I can actually count towards it as a consistent part of my play.
Fair enough, understandable. So, all right, slipping into your tarots, a couple of them are pretty self-explanatory, but one of them is the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you want to see this one when you pull your tarots?
Honestly, it is the one I want to see the least I've found. It occasionally makes a good play happen. I haven't had too much luck with it. Sometimes it's just a lot of people are actually playing Siron these days, and with those Seeds of Sienna, it makes an effectively worthless tarot. And there's just too many of these things these days that do generate those seeds. So I usually don't want to see it, to be perfectly honest. But there have been times where I'll leave the field open and just wait for them to play their what's the 4/3 Rusher Knight called again? I haven't seen it in a while.
Crimson Punisher, something. Crimson Knight.
Crimson Knight, something like that. The 4/3 Rusher, and then they'll play it thinking they've got something, and then you hit it with a Devil, and they're like, "Oh, well, I just expended 6 mana for nothing. Your go." And occasionally you'll see things like that happen, or I might hit it off Bedchamber Guards or a Long Spear Soldier while I'm swinging with a Richard, and they decide to block with their lowest level creature. It's just occasionally mind games that'll get you the win, but that's pretty much what it comes down to.
All right, fair enough. The second one you're on is Empress. How often do you want to see this one, and how come you picked it over maybe like the Fool or the one that gives you an extra refresh?
The thing is, the Empress, it's just sometimes, like I said, I'm forced to play a lot of cards into mana as opposed to playing shards, in which case I can use this to sort of offset that. It's also one of those things that's really underrated with Empress and Hermit. It really changes the game. It is something that that your opponent doesn't know. It makes a big difference. The Fool effectively sets you both in the same position, and it's something they don't know, but you can obviously discard for a better hand. But with this, you can afford to play accelerated, and they won't know what tarot you have. They might just think you're out of shards or whatever the case may be, and then fire off this thing later to set you back in the same position as your opponent, which usually makes a big difference because you've been able to play an accelerated game while they've been stuck playing turtle or defensive or whatever the case may be.
All right, fair enough. And I mean, like you said, there's sometimes you can catch them with 9 cards in your hand, play this, and they still got to discard 2, and you've got 7 or 8 in your hand, so you've effectively gained. You mentioned one of the other tarots you play, Hermit. I'm assuming this is probably the one you want to see the most. But go ahead and describe how you use it.
Hermit, once again, same thing. You can accelerate. It's one of those ones I don't mind seeing. It's actually not the one I want to see the most. It's my second favorite one, which I'll explain in a bit. Hermit is just, like I said, you can draw the 3 cards. You've kind of explained the idea already with if they're holding back their hand, they'll effectively discard cards and you'll get card advantage out of it. It's just also another way to drawing into, answers for late game problems. I think it's just a great card, especially with a deck that's lacking specific hand draw, such as I could be using Torsten's Ambition. Is that what it's called? The 2 mana one that deals 2 damage to you, but you draw 2 cards.
Yep, it is.
It is, but once again, it's 2 mana that you have to either be holding back in order to use it on their turn, or it's 2 mana that you have to use and get nothing out of it right away. You get something in your hand, but you get nothing on the field, which is where Bedchamber Guards is better. For 2 mana, you get, once again, 2 cards. You get Bedchamber Guards and something you've drawn, but you get something on the field that can deal with their creatures, and it only deals 1 damage to you.
Oh, fair enough. All right. The last... sorry, were you done explaining?
No, that was it, pretty much. Yeah.
All right, the last one you decided to run was Hangman. I haven't seen this played a lot recently. I mean, like I said, I've seen Hermit, the Fool, a lot of the cheaper ones. How come you run the Hangman as opposed to maybe one other one?
Hangman, it's just with the deck I have right now. One of the problems that it does have is if they go extremely heavy rush. I mean, I can only expend so many rogues and other things in order to deal with other things. At some point, it might come to the point where I actually have to throw down a bunch of defenders. Hangman is also one of those cards that once you see it on turn one, it effectively can change your game strategy. It is something that you can bank on in terms of winning. There's been plenty of times where it's come down to a stalemate, and this guy sees me tossing defenders, and you can trick them into believing that you're just trying to fend for yourself here, trying to get them to defend against what they're throwing at you, and they'll continue to throw all these attackers down, and effectively at some point they will swing, thinking that this is the time I'm going to do a lot of damage to him, and they might bring you down to 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be. But if I have in defense, let's say a couple of Richards and Spearhead of Crimson King, effectively the next turn is when you can win the game, because when Richard goes on the offensive, it's one creature that does more damage than often 4 or 5 creatures that they may be throwing at you, and it's just one of those things that goes very well with him, that you can throw cards in defense and then effectively change the game later as you see fit. If they do throw defenders in as you're throwing defenders, that's even better, because when you swap it in, those defenders are going to go to attack, and you have an open board to swing on.
Yep, and it's also always nice to see that if they try to Hangman you, you've got the answer to Hangman back.
Exactly, that is completely true.
Alright, well, that is the complete run on your deck list from top to bottom. Pretty rare heavy deck, so
yeah.
If you're looking to get into the game, it's going to be one that, it's going to take a while to build, but it seems to be pretty effective. So, any closing comments you'd like to put towards the decks?
Yeah, well, just a comment about something. I mean, a lot of people might look at this and be like, oh, he's running 3 hypers. Like, where am I going to get those? I was going to say, one thing is a very good replacement, in my opinion, for this card would be I believe you run it in your item deck. There's an arena card. Now it'll be a little more expensive to get, but it is, once again, a completely fantastic card. The 4/4 that's, creates those safeguards when it kills something. What is it called? Flagbearer of Steel.
Yep.
Yeah. Same thing. I mean, it doesn't have the quite the kick that Richard does, but at the end of the day, when you swing in, you are getting a card out of it, like almost guaranteed. It is good card advantage. It is a strong defender. It is a strong attacker. It definitely, as you mentioned in your previous review, has a lot of benefit over the original one as opposed to the arena one. 5/3 is nowhere near as good as 4/4. I don't care who says it is. It's not. And so I would definitely say, if you're looking for a replacement, you can do that. But the other thing I was going to say is I don't think the hypers are nearly as bad to get as people seem to be claiming. I have just been gambling by putting in single LC points into the new booster, and I've effectively collected, I will tell you how many hypers I have right now. I have 5, 7, 8 plus 4, 13 hypers just off of buying single cards.
Oh, wow, nice.
So if anybody's telling me they're hard to get, it's really not that much. I mean, today I ended up getting 5,000 arena points and 15 LC for, I guess, being placed in the top 20. I blew those 15 LC on random cards from the new booster. Pulled out an Evelyn. So, I've noticed that probably the turnout ratio seems to be about 1 in 15 in terms of getting these things if you're doing the single card buys, which I think is effectively pretty good. It's not so bad. I've also managed to kick 2 rares out of buying it today. So I'm starting to lean towards buying single cards as opposed to buying boosters. It seems to be kind of the way to go right now.
I agree. I think I got like 11 LC or something left from just playing games, and I picked up 3 rares and a bunch of uncommons myself. So I definitely have to agree with your assumption on that. So, all right. Well, I don't have anything in closing. So thank you for your time, Mr. Alice.
No worries. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. So this will probably take a while to upload since it's probably going to be about 40 minutes long. But hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, it's a different spin, and it's actually me getting off my lazy ass and actually posting something on my channel. So once again, if you guys are looking for a pretty active crew with some pretty laid back people and good players, check out Outlaws. So once again, thank you, Mr. Alice, and have a good night.
All right. Take it easy, buddy.